Okay, I think it's safe to say that we may have found the most cursed player in NBA history, and it's James Harden. So over the past couple of days, I took a few days off, spent some time with the family, Thanksgiving, y'all know how it be, turned on the tube and caught up with some basketball as well, and my oh my, what do I see? The Clippers losing again, but this time it's really, really bad. The Clippers ended up losing to a Dallas Mavericks team that is at the bottom of the conference, but also the Mavericks were without Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, Daniel Gafford, and Derek Lively. Young Cooper was running up and down the floor, self-creating, and just finishing all over a defense that in theory should be able to slow him down. But no, the Clippers, they just suck. They're really, really bad. And while I was watching this game, I once more came to the revelation that the Clippers offense, it's horrible if James Harden is not practically involved with every single action. But here we are, and the Clippers consistently find themselves at the bottom of the conference and in the middle of a 4-game losing streak. And as I'm watching all this unfold, I'm starting to think of other video ideas. What exactly should the Clippers do next? Or maybe just pass on the Clippers overall because we already made 2 videos on this channel about them. But then it started to dawn on me, damn, Harden always finds himself in these terrible predicaments. Like it happens way too often. Harden puts himself in a situation that seems to be great, seems to be advantageous for who he is as a player or who he may be towards the tail end of the season. And before we know it, bro, it's a much worse situation than we originally anticipated. And this has happened pretty consistently throughout Harden's career to the point where I'm just convinced that Harden is either unlucky or he is extremely cursed, or maybe both. This dates back all the way to the beginning of his career, where we all know how unlucky it was for Harden to find himself on another roster. He starts out playing for the Oklahoma City Thunder in the perfect situation, playing next to Serge Ibaka, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, and by year 3, not only is Harden a 6-Man of the Year recipient, averaging 17 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, great shooting splits, and carried a lot of that production over to the postseason, but also this is a team that would go on to make the finals. Now, to be fair, Harden didn't play the greatest. However, it was his first finals appearance. This was a young team, and they would go on to lose to the Big 3 out in Miami, led by Bosh, Wade, and LeBron. However, the biggest takeaway from that finals in 2012 was that this is the team of the future. This is the roster that is going to shape the next decade of basketball. And if everything pans out, this will easily go down as one of the most talented rosters in NBA history. But then before you know it, Harden is then traded to the Houston Rockets. Now, as we all know, it's extremely unfortunate that Harden was not able to finish his career out in OKC, but I don't think people put into proper perspective how crazy it is to go from that Thunder's team to the Houston Rockets at that point in time in NBA history. Because the Rockets, they were a dormant franchise. We're talking about a franchise that not only had not made a postseason appearance in the years leading up to that acquisition, but even when they made the playoffs in the Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming era, it was extremely underwhelming, only had 1 appearance that extended beyond the first round, and effectively, the Rockets had not made a deep postseason run since Hakeem Olajuwon had a Rockets jersey on. Like, that's how long it had been, in the 90s. So for a player to go from a 6-Man of the Year recipient on a team that was going to lead and dominate the next decade of basketball to the face of that franchise is crazy. But Harden exceeded expectations once more, had instant impact, played an all-NBA level in his first year, 24, 25 points per game, amazing offensive weapon, and for the first time since 2009, led Houston to a playoff appearance. Now, of course, the way that the roster was built, they weren't going to make a deep postseason run. They actually got knocked out in the first round by Harden's ex-team in OKC, but Houston had found the face of their franchise and quickly started to build around him. Unfortunately, they did so with a player that started to regress immediately in Dwight Howard. See, at the time, Dwight, though he was a very dominant big man in his previous years, especially in Orlando, he was dealing with severe back problems and regressed so rapidly that within his time in Houston, he only made 1 All-NBA selection and 0 All-Defensive teams. But then there was another problem that Harden had to overcome immediately, and that was a new contender in the Western Conference that really reshaped everything for years to come. See, when they were building the duo between Harden and Dwight, originally the concept was there were only 3 teams that you really had to contend with in the Western Conference: OKC, San Antonio, and the Clippers. The Spurs quickly fell off after the 2014 run due to age. OKC cannot consistently find themselves healthy enough to be a constant threat in the postseason between the years of 2013 2015 and 2016, and then the Clippers were a very beatable team as many teams were able to beat them, including the Houston Rockets in 2015. However, in that exact same year, unfortunately, a new dynasty just emerged out of nowhere in the Golden State Warriors that not only was extremely dominant, but literally changed the way that everyone was going to play basketball for the foreseeable future. So the attempt to try to build a team to compete with them that featured a big, especially one that was no longer as dominant as he once was in Dwight, that was not going to be a recipe for any type of long-lasting success in this Western Conference. So there was that. And as time progressed, Dwight continued to regress, and eventually the Houston Rockets decided to pivot off Dwight and really try to figure out what was the true ceiling of James Harden. And this is where the next problem occurred with Harden, and that was he was peaking at the same time as Russell Westbrook and Curry, and so now there's awards that he's supposed to receive that he's not going to receive. In 2015, Harden had better numbers across the board effectively in contrast to Curry, but unfortunately did not win the MVP because Curry won more games, and that was the whole argument. But then in 2017, Harden lose the MVP award to Russell Westbrook despite having more wins because Russ statistically is better than him, which is a direct contradiction to why he lost it in 2017. But even in a much wider picture here, Harden peaked at levels in which should normally result in multiple MVPs, but unfortunately, he peaked at a point in time where Curry is going through historic runs and having historic seasons from a winning perspective, and then Russell Westbrook out of the blue shows everyone that you can actually average a triple-double in the NBA, which then raises the bar and threshold of MVP status so high that he only ends up with one MVP award. But then fast forwarding to that year in 2018, Harden is amazing. He's putting up ridiculous scoring numbers. He leads the league in scoring. His assist numbers are also through the roof as well. Just offensively, he peaks at levels of all-time status. And while doing so, the Houston Rockets, they find some replacements for him. They move off of Kevin McHale, they bring in Mike D'Antoni, and they eventually find the replacement for Dwight Howard after moving off of him and bringing in Chris Paul. This results into a 65-win season, which again helps him out winning in league MVP. But unfortunately, while all of this is happening, the already dominant team becomes even more dominant because they add Kevin Durant on their roster. To this day, I will not be gaslit to believe that some of you all actually thought and had expectations of Harden beating that team, especially because when they added Kevin Durant to the roster, everyone said that that was unfair and they were unbeatable. But for whatever reason, some of y'all have convinced yourself that Harden, of all people, should have the expectations of beating them. Makes no sense. However, Harden was the closest out of anyone throughout that stretch of years to actually pulling off the impossible, because as the Rockets find themselves in the conference finals for the second time in the James Harden era, they are up 3-2 against the KD Curry-led Warriors. But then tragedy strikes. Chris Paul pulls a hamstring. He then sits out in Game 6 and then in Game 7. If that's not enough, even though they're up by 13 points, the Houston Rockets go on a stretch where they miss 27 threes in a row. 27! Trevor Ariza can't buy a bucket. The following year, even though, yes, Kevin Durant does get hurt in the playoffs and they finish a series against the Warriors while KD was unavailable, Chris Paul still isn't 100% himself either, as he's still nursing his hamstring. And again, despite with KD not being there, they end up losing to the Golden State Warriors once more. The next year, the Houston Rockets move off of Chris Paul, believing that he's no longer going to be able to play at a high level as he continues to get older. They bring in Russell Westbrook as their last attempt to build a title contending team around James Harden. Unfortunately, the fit is a bit wonky with the overlapping in skill set and the limitations from Westbrook. So the only thing that they could do is just double down on this idea that a duo of Harden and Russ can really lead them deep into the postseason in a league that's really only dominated by other duos at that time. So they decided to get rid of Clint Capella, run a 5-out offense, and make a clear runway for both Russ and Harden to attack the basket. This actually works, and it works much better than I think a lot of people remember. They were easily one of the better offenses in the NBA and didn't really take that much of a step back defensively despite the lack of size. But then the NBA paused due to COVID. They came back, and once they were back, it seemed as if like they were off their rhythm a little bit, especially for a team that was overly dependent on three-point shooting. But then the worst happened once more. Russell Westbrook suffered a strained right quad. He missed a couple of games in the first round matchup against the Thunder that they barely squeaked past in a 7-game series, and then matched up against the Los Angeles Lakers team that dominated them thoroughly. And in that matchup, Harden played fairly well from what I remember and even looking at some of the numbers, but Russ's limitations as well as potentially his injuries really held back the team, and they ended up losing to a team that would go on to win the championship, which continues to be a reoccurring theme in Harden's career. So, of course, with the Rockets exhausting practically every option they had, they moved off of Daryl Morey, they also fired Mike D'Antoni. Harden, understandably so, demands a trade, and he gets moved to the Brooklyn Nets. Now, he lands on a Brooklyn Nets team that features Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, forming a new trio and a super team in the NBA. Unfortunately, they're not healthy and they barely play. They only play 16 games in the regular season and they have a record of 13-3. However, when they're out, Harden is still playing amazing. He's actually playing so good that it is very obvious if all three of these players are playing at the same time, it is very clear that they're going to dominate the NBA. And they do so in the first round matchup against the Boston Celtics when Harden, KD, and Kyrie are all available. They put up ridiculous numbers and smoke the Boston Celtics. But tragedy happens once more. Game 1, second round against the Milwaukee Bucks, Harden pulls his hamstring. A few games later, Kyrie tweaks his ankle and effectively just leaves Kevin Durant out there trying to figure out how he can win this series practically on his own. To be fair to Harden, he goes out there, puts his body on the line, even though he's clearly not 100% healthy and is playing on a bum hamstring, and they were still this close to beating the Bucks and making it to the conference finals, where they would have to match up against an Atlanta Hawks team that played games without Trae Young in the conference finals. But unfortunately, none of that materializes because KD's foot is on the line on a series-defining shot in Game 7 that is a difference between going in OT or winning Game 7 and moving on. Then, the following year, even more ridiculous things happen. The coaching staff gets weaker, they lose very pivotal pieces on their bench, but more importantly, Kyrie, unwilling to participate in the vaccine mandate, is now unavailable to play games, and then he's also doing some other shenanigans off the court as well. James Harden, for reasons that still have not been explained, but I theorize, is upset due to Kyrie's unwillingness to participate, and also knowing that he's putting his body on the line because he's still nursing his hamstring, eventually demands a trade, and he finds himself playing for the Philadelphia 76ers, where he's playing next to Joel Embiid and a rising Tyrese Maxey. Now, you would think that this would be the spot. This would be the team that he's going to land on and be the second option to an all-time great peak because Joel Embiid was playing at ridiculous levels. But just as it has always been in the years prior, as soon as the playoffs begin, everything falls apart due to injuries. In Harden's first year in Philly, not only is he still nursing his hamstring, but in the playoffs, Joel Embiid starts to miss games due to a torn ligament in his right thumb, then an orbital fracture, as well as a concussion. Like a bunch of things just happened to Embiid. It was ridiculous. Then the next year, Harden plays significantly better, the best basketball that he had played since he tore his hamstring. He actually leads the league in assists, Maxey is developing as well, and Embiid plays so well that he finished off the season winning league MVP. This is the year that everyone thought that they were going to make a lot of noise and they had a real legitimate chance to make a deep push in the playoffs. But unfortunately, as it always does, injuries just hit at the most unopportune time. The Philadelphia 76ers go into the postseason and Joel Embiid springs his LCL, which is a right knee injury, and he's sidelined for some postseason games, but even when he is playing, he is clearly nowhere near close to being 100%, and the Sixers end up losing to the Boston Celtics in 7 games. Fast forward to the offseason, Daryl Morey makes some promises to James Harden that he does not fulfill. He gets upset, voices his frustrations, and effectively forces his way out of another situation and lands with the Clippers, where he is joining Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and Kawhi Leonard. The fit once more is a bit wonky between Russ and Harden, so Russ is regulated to the bench, which in my opinion makes his team even better, and then they go into the playoffs anticipated and expected to once more make a lot of noise. But unfortunately, as always, injuries hit at the wrong time, and Kawhi Leonard only plays 2 games and a first round out against the Phoenix Suns. Yeah, it happens almost every single time, which then leads us to last year, where the Clippers allow Russell Westbrook to walk in free agency. They're unwilling to pay Kawhi, and effectively they built their roster around James Harden and Kawhi Leonard as a duo. The unfortunate part about this, though, is that Kawhi is unable to play 80 plus games in a regular season as well as be healthy and available for postseason play. So the Clippers manage his minutes and his games played throughout the regular season, so much so where he finished last year only playing 37 games, which then forced a 35-year-old James Harden, who I think most of us believe at that stage of his career was supposed to be the second option on a team. He's now the first option on the team, playing 79 games while also playing over 35 minutes a night, trying to help out Big Zoo and Norman Powell develop as players as if like he's back in Houston. Like it makes no sense. Harden does make an All-NBA selection, and it is one of his most impactful seasons over the last handful of years. But even with them managing the minutes of Kawhi and him not playing that many games, they unfortunately draw a first-round matchup with the Denver Nuggets. And even in that series, it took a lot of luck, a lot of crazy shots to drop for the Nuggets for them to pull off that series win in 7 games. And here we are today, again, 2025, it's about to be 2026, and James Harden at 36 years old is having to backpack an offense as if like he has a Houston Rockets jersey on. Bro, Harden is out there averaging 28 points, 9 assists, nearly 6 rebounds. Shooting splits are very respectable for someone his age. And as I said in the previous video, bro, if Harden doesn't play like 37 minutes a night, they have absolutely no chance to compete against any team in the NBA. Be very mindful while all this is happening. Kawhi, who we thought came into the season 100% healthy or at least prepared to play more minutes and more games, he's already missed games. Bradley Beal, who is supposed to be a replacement for Norman Powell, is now out for the entire season. And that again has effectively put Harden in a predicament to where he's having to do way more than he originally thought. And it's just, it's consistent. It is consistent, bro. Now, as I say all of this, I know for a fact many people are going to sit here and tell me, you're missing a lot of context. You're not going to talk about any of the downfalls and bad games and bad moments from Harden. Let me be clear. This video is not my attempt to absolve Harden from all of his poor performances in the postseason, all of his bad decisions, his lack of effort defensively, his, laughable effort to show up to training camp in shape. Like, I'm not saying that Harden is perfect and it's always someone else's fault. I am not saying that. However, what I am saying is that I think a lot of people look at Harden's career through this lens of a player that was supposed to do more, that was always in these great situations, and they will just blindly list off his teammates without putting into context what exactly happened every step along the way. And again, this does not mean that Harden isn't flawless, but at the end of the day, if you really put into context what's happening, Harden went from one of the most amazing situations that anybody could be placed into when he first entered the NBA as a six-man coming off of one of the most talented teams in the league to immediately being thrust into a franchise guy, despite the fact that that's not what he wanted. He didn't want to be the franchise guy for a dormant organization that had not made the playoffs in years. He then went from that situation, had to play alongside Dwight Howard, but he regressed due to back injuries. That have nothing to do with Harden. He then tried to figure out how to win an MVP, even though every single year they kept changing the criteria. That had nothing to do with Harden. He then tried to figure out how to beat a KD-led Warriors team with Chris Paul and a hamstring injury, with Trevor Ariza not being able to buy a bucket and all his other teammates participating in a 27-shot stretch where none of them can make a three. He participated, but damn, he can't make shots for Trevor Ariza. He then had to figure out how he was going to be able to win with Russell Westbrook, which is already challenging enough, but then you add on top of the fact that Russ got hurt. Then he went to Brooklyn to try to play next to KD and Kyrie. They were both hurt all throughout the regular season. Then he got hurt in the playoffs. Then Kyrie got hurt in the playoffs as well. Then Kyrie was unwilling to play. Then he got traded to Philly. Then Embiid got hurt. Then Kawhi got hurt. Then it's been ongoing. It's been ongoing. And then if he forces a trade, y'all are just going to sit here and say, oh man, he's forcing his way out of another situation. Like the discourse that will follow Harden every single time he makes a decision that I think most of us would agree with. I just don't understand how he's always the one to blame when there's things that are out of his control that is dictating his career. Like I don't know. But Harden, I don't know. Am I bugging? Is he cursed? Is he unlucky? Am I overdoing it? Am I giving too much bail to Harden? Y'all let me know in the comment section below, because it's ridiculous. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.